As the dust begins to settle on the health crisis of the last 2 years, and as humanity begins to wake up from a bad dream, it's essential for a sensible moratorium to take place. We need to take stock of what happened, learn the lessons that the experience has taught us, and ensure we react more proportionally next time, with less of the insane hysteria that we've all grown so tired of. But I fear the opposite will happen. That the most influential sectors of our society will look at the disaster of the last 2 years, will admit that we got virtually everything wrong, and will then insist that we do exactly the same thing again next time, only much harder. We've seen this in the appalling recent events in Canada. And for more evidence of this, I'd like to present to you an interview GB News held with Dr. Peter English back in December 2021. Dr. English was adamant that full restrictions had been imposed in light of the new variant, that any deviation from that path would see an overwhelmed health service and a calamitous death toll, and that these restrictions should continue indefinitely. But what really struck about the interview was Dr. English's attitude. His arrogance bordered on hostility and disdain. His impatience with his interviewer was apparent, and he bristled with indignation that anyone should have the temerity to challenge his doom-laden forecasts. It really is worth a look.
But think about all the damage the other side of this. If we have another lockdown, then we're talking about people's jobs.
We're not talking about lockdowns. We're talking about sensible measures.
They're not sensible measures. How can you tell me that what's happening in Wales and Scotland is sensible? And that is jobs, that is livelihoods, that is existence of people's lives. It's a complete and utter nonsense.
Is having the virus running rampant. If you have the virus running rampant, that does more harm to the economy than some short-term.
I don't think it does. I think it's proved now that it hasn't. What was the point in the vaccination process then?
The vaccination program does reduce the risk. It doesn't eliminate it. If you have vast numbers of cases, you will still have enough cases, despite vaccination, to overwhelm the NHS.
So why have the numbers in hospital not gone up significantly since this outbreak? This outbreak has been going on long enough. We've known that it's been there for a few weeks.
We've had more hospital admissions than no. The numbers are going up.
Yeah, it's gone up by 12%.
Do you understand how exponential growth works?
Yes, I do.
Double every few days.
Yes, I do.
So we can expect them to double every few days. And it won't take many doublings for that to rise to vast numbers, which will overwhelm the health service.
I don't think it will. I think you're scaremongering.
I think you don't know what you're talking about. I think that the science, all the scientists who know about these things are really, really anxious for the health service. All these people finding pretexts for saying it's not that serious. We don't need to worry about it.
I'm not saying that it's not serious, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't monitor it, but I'm just saying that the decision by the Welsh government and the Scottish government would appear to be an overreaction.
Okay, who's the public health consultant?
Well, just because you're a consultant doesn't necessarily mean that you can see into the future.
We don't need to see into the future. We can look at all the previous waves and see what has happened.
You can't, because you're not taking into account the vaccination program, which has been exceptionally successful. And if you're telling me that the vaccination program isn't doing anything at all, if it's doing something, yeah, I'm afraid your argument makes no sense. Either the vaccination process was a complete and utter waste of time, or it allows us to live with this thing.
It's the proportion of people who get sick. We still have nothing like enough people have had 3 doses for the population to be protected.
When we've got 20,000 people in hospital, then by all means say, let's have some restrictions. Until then, to my mind, it's complete and utter nonsense.
Wait until there are 20,000 people in hospital, and there are going to be 40,000 in a few days' time because it doubles. Then
okay. So I'm on all week. I'm on all week. If it goes up.
Now, several months later, the verdict is in. We can see if Dr. English's certainty and imperious, hostile arrogance were justified. And they weren't. He was emphatically wrong about everything. Restrictions were not reimposed. They were lifted. But his apocalyptic warnings did not come true. In fact, the reverse happened. The rates of infection fell sharply. Hospitalisations rose briefly, then levelled off, and then also dropped rapidly. Maybe Dr. English just doesn't know what exponential means. Opening up was the right course of action. Closing down again would have been a pointless disaster. But will these undeniable facts hold sway? Because a significant slice of the establishment has become wedded to the most alarmist forecasts imaginable, even after everything that's happened. SAGE, the British government's advisory body, had warned that 6,000 people would die every day during the winter, unless punitive restrictions were imposed. But all the rules were eased instead, and the death rate averaged at about 200 a day, a mere fraction of that promised by their model. Neil Ferguson had endorsed that 6,000 a day figure. But then this is the man who got it spectacularly wrong on mad cow's disease, and swine flu too. Why are people like this still being listened to? Well, the main reason is that the muzzle and lockdown alarmists simply can't admit that they got it wrong. They can't face the fact that all those stringent sacrifices and all the vile abuse they heaped on their critics were mistaken. They would rather carry on being wrong than ever admit that they were wrong. Look at the appalling smugness and boneheaded obstinacy of leaders like Justin Trudeau and Jacinda Ardern, ever wedded to a totalitarian response to a waning threat that was never quite the ogre they painted it as. It seems obvious now that in future we should shield the tiny percentage who are vulnerable to such maladies, but that the vast majority should carry on as usual, especially once effective medicines have been rolled out. This channel said exactly that a year and a half ago, and that position has been thoroughly vindicated by events. Yet these are lessons that are still being ignored by many. This is partly explained by a society that has become wedded to the idea of safety, that the population need to be protected from the threat of upsetting words or ideas, that students need safe spaces to recover from any encounter with views they fail to share. The pursuit of safety sounds like a noble cause, but it comes into continual conflict with that of freedom, and a much more agreeable balance must be found if our societies are to prosper. Yet huge swathes maintain only the most alarmist position. We'll settle for nothing less than the most extreme and restrictive response. They seem utterly unable to accept any suggestion of nuance or proportionality. The Canadian truckers' protest, which had begun rippling across the globe, was an optimistic sign that freedom and a more measured and sensible response may have begun to win the battle. Fear is contagious, but so is courage. Yet the totalitarian clamping down of that protest has put a lid on such optimism. Huge swathes, mostly on the political left, are stubbornly clinging to their frenzied beliefs in defiance of all evidence and rationality. The news media, which enthusiastically stoke the fires of the fearmongers and the alarmists, hold a terrible culpability for all that has gone so badly wrong. And as recent efforts to stifle and centre any dissenting views have shown, this tendency has not really begun to abate. But this too is a counterproductive approach. Those who are hesitant about the recent medical breakthroughs will not be won over by the stifling of questions or alternatives. They will only be persuaded that they are right in perceiving some vast conspiracy against them. They will double down on their beliefs, rather than being encouraged to question them in the sphere of open debate. As I speak, there are some glimmers that the tide may be turning, but numerous states are still imposing deeply repressive measures. And the real test will come when the next variant emerges. Who wants to bet that half the population will run around like headless chickens once more? Many are now waking up from this nightmare. But the political class, teaching unions, media, scientific establishment and medical profession are not. These, remember, are the people who've longed for years to direct our lives, to tell us what we're allowed to eat, what we're allowed to drink, when to move, how to exercise, never to smoke or consume drugs. And finally, in 2020, everyone began to listen to them. They got to lecture everyone on how to behave in every way. And my God, did they love it that a compliant population meekly surrendered to the diktats they issued from on high. And we can see in the likes of Dr. English just how furious that they are that paternalistic influence is starting to wane. This is one of the great political divides. Most of us just want to be left alone, desire the liberty to live our lives. But the left have always loved telling everyone else what to do. And they've always reacted furiously to anyone who defies them, questions them, or mocks them. That will never change. And that's why I fear history will repeat itself again. After all, those who've ignored the calamitous lessons of dozens of failed socialist states are unlikely to learn the lesson from the last 2 years. The next time, the rest of us must find our courage much sooner, because the damage of recent years is really still waiting to be revealed. If you'd like to support this channel, please like and subscribe. And if you're interested in these topics, I've written 2 books which go into them in extensive detail. They're called The Tyranny of the Left, and they're available on the links below. Please do pick them up and let me know what you think. Thank you.